Right. Hello. This is an example of a type of PowerPoint presentation needed for West Cheshire College BTEC National Diploma Music Practice and Music Technology students working on Unit 31, Pop Music in Practice. I will give a demonstration PowerPoint based on the blues. Keep an eye and an ear out for the way I structure my research. It will be based around this structure. I will first establish basic information, and that will achieve me a pass. I will then expand on that information. That will be to achieve a merit, and then I'll discuss why is it good or bad. This will include any comparisons. For example, I might discuss why I like the blues structure by comparing it to the standard pop structure. This will be to get a distinction. Okay, let's start by looking at some key artists. I've chosen Robert Johnson, the legendary Delta bluesman who allegedly sold his soul to the devil in exchange for his blues guitar skills. His guitar technique has been compared to the sound of two guitarists playing simultaneously. I've also chosen Jimi Hendrix, whose pioneering work with effects and psychedelic blues rock made him a legend. He's remembered for his unique version of the US national anthem at Woodstock, which he infused with the sounds of war. To finish, I've looked at Eric Clapton, who is revered for his work with psychedelic blues superband Cream and his distinctive slow style. I feel all of these artists have contributed greatly to blues music, but the way Hendrix fused blues and rock together and opened it out to a wider audience makes him the standout artist for me. Okay, so in summary of that, what I did first of all for my pass, I named the artists. Then secondly, for a merit, I gave some further information about them and their music. And then for a distinction, I assessed which had the most impact. In this slide, I'm looking at the structure of blues music. It follows a repetitive structure which brings the verse and chorus together in a single movement. This is repeated, emphasising the repetition of the first vocal line and qualifying it with the refrain. It usually follows a 12-bar structure, but there are 8 and 16-bar variants. Call and response techniques are often employed, with the guitar mimicking the vocal line. The chord progression follows a 1-4-5 pattern. You can see that I've included the basic pop and rock structure on this slide, which is formatted for radio play and usually consists of verse, verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, chorus, or something similar. I feel that there is more room for originality in the blues. The simple structure means that the lyrics must address the song subject directly, whereas I feel a lot of modern pop music struggles to fit lyrics into the rigid structure designated by radio. The blues is also more open to adaptation and has been happy to adopt aspects of rock and pop over the years. For an example of this, see the music of Bobby Bland, a blues musician who makes use of bridges to complement his blues structure. Okay, so in that section you can see that first of all for a pass I described the structure. For a merit I then went on to explain about chord progression and stylistic focus, which provides more detail, and for a distinction I compared the blues structure with pop rock structure and assessed which I relate to most and why. Okay, on this slide you can see some of the key instruments in blues music. In the bottom left hand corner we can see some of the lesser used instruments such as piano, harmonica, trumpet or sax. The more common instruments in modern blues are in the main section of the slide. On the right hand side we can see the rhythm section made up of the drums and the bass guitar. These instruments work together to give the sense of rhythm which is so important to blues music. The stylistic focus of blues music, however, is on the guitar and vocals, which work together to give melody, meaning and emotion to a music genre with a history of suffering. I can relate most to the emotive lyrics in blues music, so I understand why vocals take the lead. Okay, so that was a quick section, but you can see that for a pass I described the instruments. For a merit I discussed the stylistic focus and the role of each instrument and how they work together, and then for a distinction I assessed the reasons why the vocals, for example, take stylistic focus. Blues music was born at a time when European settlers were discovering the new world of America. British, French, Dutch and Spanish pilgrims needed help building settlements and began the appalling trade in slaves from Africa where colonies were already built. Slaves on the ships and in the fields would sing songs to express their suffering and create bonds and communities. After slavery was abolished in the early 19th century, African Americans were still suffering from prejudice and segregation in America. Their standard of living was very poor, and they were oppressed by a culture that had grown used to seeing them as second-class citizens. The same songs that expressed hardship during slavery continued to do the same for African Americans in the newly constituted United States. Eventually, African American culture was welcomed into mainstream American culture. This was obvious in the Harlem Renaissance. This was a period in the 1920s and 30s which saw an explosion of African American art, music and literature. The blues became mainstream music. I feel it's important to understand how blues music has served as a constant form of expression and rebellion, helping oppressed people to fight their way to an equal footing in society. Okay, so again, you can see in that section that for a pass, I described the history of how blues came about. For a merit, I explained in detail why it would appeal to the feelings of those listening to it or making it. And for my distinction, I assessed the impact it had on the culture of the time. Blues has influenced many other genres of music. The one that springs immediately to mind is rock and roll. The people listening to and making rock and roll music were looking for a way to express themselves and put across a message of fun, hedonism and excess to a world that they saw as dull and stuck up. Rock and roll saw the impact of blues music on cultural change and adapted it to fit its own agenda. Many of the chord sequences are the same as blues. Hip-hop also picked up on the importance of rebellion against oppression in blues music. A lot of early hip-hop was about escaping from the ghetto. Ghettos are run-down communities where people feel trapped and lured into crime by their poor financial situations. Hip-hop was a way to make money and spread the word. Hip-hop and blues also both have obvious links to racial tensions. Perhaps the most closely linked genre to blues is folk music. The picture you can see on this slide is of Woody Guthrie. He toured America during the Great Depression to show how his people in the Midwest were suffering homelessness and destitution thanks to the financial meltdown in America. His storytelling style echoes that of blues music. Both genres were arguably at their creative peak during the early 20th century. Overall, from these genres, I relate to blues music more because I find the simplistic structure and direct messages are more powerful and leave no room for misunderstanding. Okay, so again, for my pass, I've described the genres linked to blues. For a merit, I've then explained in detail what aspects of each are linked to blues. And then for my distinction, I assess which genre I relate to most, and more importantly, the reasons why. Just a note, as this slide and the slide on history of blues both refer heavily to culture and society, I don't need to include a separate slide on that subject. Okay. In order to show how blues music has developed musically, I've chosen to compare two artists from different generations, starting with Robert Johnson. If you listen to, for example, I Believe I'll Dust My Broom, you can see that the guitar is controlled, and whilst his picking is layered and developed, the structure is simple and straightforward. Johnson's life was unremarkable, except for the fact that he was murdered by a lover's jealous husband. His music made no real use of technology except for simple recording techniques. By contrast, Hendrix, on a song such as Voodoo Child, uses extravagant, heavily distorted guitars. The lyrics are of excess and are very positive. Hendrix was world famous during his lifetime and died young after misusing his body. I feel both artists have been incredibly influential on blues music. However, I think Hendrix pushed the genre forward more than Johnson with his use of effects. Okay, so again, you can see for a pass how I described two artists from different generations. For a merit, I explained in detail the comparisons between the two, and then for a distinction, I looked at and assessed which artist I feel is more important to the blues genre and why. This final slide looks at the technological development and its impact on blues music. As we can see, early instruments such as the diddley bow, which was made up of a plank of wood with a piece of wire nailed to it, were eventually replaced by electronic instruments and equipment. This led to better recording standards and more experimental styles. The digital and internet revolution has pushed the genre even further, and music production software such as Ableton, Pro Tools, Reason and Logic have opened a door for electronically produced blues music. The production quality improves again, but that's because the sounds are purely digital. However, it does marginalise the artist and put the future of live instrumental music in danger. Because of this, I feel we need to be careful about how far we can push digital music. Okay, so in that final section, I described the technological advantages of blues music for a pass. For a merit, I explained in detail the benefits of each advancement, and then for a distinction, I assessed the impact of the developments on the genre. So that's a basic introduction to the structure, the general structure that your PowerPoint should take. I don't expect you to follow mine to the letter. I want you to be creative and do what you feel that you should do with yours. Obviously, you don't need to go, because you're doing three genres, you might not necessarily need to go into the amount of detail that I've gone into. I've just made sure that I've covered everything in order to make sure that what I produce would achieve a distinction. So you've got to use your judgment to say, which am I going to put in, make sure that it doesn't overrun, people are going to have to listen to it. So be creative, but use your own judgment about how much content should go in. Okay, hope this helps.